I have a lot on my mind today, and because we have such a long video, I'll have plenty of opportunities to share these different thoughts. So in this first little post-introduction clip of me talking, I just want to say thank you for being here. There's a lot to come ahead of us. I'm going to go into great detail into everything we're hearing, but for now, I'm just welcoming you. Hi, and I'm going to give you a brief thought of mine to think about as we go into the next track. The Monarch MKIII against the Monarch MKII, the obvious showdown of the day, although we're going to look at a lot of other comparisons too, I think already is starting to show us that the MKIII is a brighter experience. It's a more open experience. It's not an upgrade to the Mark II. It is clearly just a different tonal balance, with particularly when it comes to the treble region. Whether it's your taste, whether it's how you want your instruments and your favorite tracks to sound, we will see. Okay, to me, so far, the Mark II just sounds more lush. It does sound a little bit more natural. I personally do prefer the Mark II's timbre. Its balance of the frequencies. But that's just me. Let's keep listening. I'll have a lot more to say to come. For the next track, we're going to listen to another piece of rock. Please listen carefully, especially to the drums. I heard a difference here, and I want to see if you hear it too.
Sometimes I feel like I don't have a partner. Sometimes I feel like my only friend is the city I live in, the city of angel. Lonely as I am, together we cry. Drive on the streets 'cause she's my companion. I walk through the hills 'cause she knows who I am. She sees my good deeds and she kisses me windy. And I never worry, now that is a lie. I don't ever want
Okay, so that could just easily be that once the fact that we only listen to a small segment of that track. You know, we might need extended listening to get really sure about what we think we're hearing. Fair enough. But I'll tell you that in real life, my experience of that track in listening to both of these IEMs in full was that the drums and certain instruments in some selections of music on the Monarch MKIII don't balance them in the way that I enjoy on the Mark II. The Mark II seems to give an even attribution to each of the instruments, almost no matter what I try to throw at it, in a beautifully balanced way. Whereas the Mark III, it pushes the brightness, but it pushes it in a direction that has a way of, and again, it's probably something else being scooped out or lowered in relative action compared to the treble, but there's something about the Mark III that almost sounds like it's ever so slightly hiding some of the drum sounds. I can't put a finger on it precisely at this moment, but it just sounds like some things are hiding a little bit behind the volume of other things. Maybe I'm onto something, maybe not at all. Maybe you don't hear what I hear. But the other thing I noted from that playback in the Mark III was that it pushes up those higher tonal frequencies to a point that is ever so slightly less than smooth, less than buttery easy to listen to. Like, there are sets that play up the treble, but in a way that's super chill, that like doesn't have it's flawless. Like, What comes to mind might be the MEST Mark II. The MEST Mark I really pushed the treble, but once you got kind of used to it at all, it was like a fantastic thing to welcome to your headspace. But the Mark III, I just couldn't, even if I listened to it for a very long time, even though it's a very strong recommendation, I can't say I prefer it compared to other gear that presents treble, so forward-like. So what do I mean exactly? Let's go into more detail. Let's show the Monarch MEST, the Monarch MEST II, the unique melody MEST II, MEST Mark II. So many marks, Mark 1s, 2s, 3s from every different company. We're going to compare the Mark III Monarch to the MEST Mark II now. And let's see what we can get from similarly expensive and similarly treble forward gear.
Take me to the place I love. Take me all the way. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's hard to believe that there's nobody out there. It's hard to believe that I'm all alone. At least I have her love to see that she loves me. Lonely as I am, together we cry. I don't ever wanna feel like I did that day. Take me to the place I love. Take me all the way. I don't ever wanna feel like I did that day. Take me to the place I love. Take me all the way. Yeah, yeah. Oh, no, no, no. Yeah, yeah. Love me, I say, yeah, yeah. One time. Is where I drew some blood. I could not get enough. Forgot about my love. I gave my life away. Where I stay.
Okay, so this is a tough one. I think immediately a lot of people will be in one or the other camp and not much in between, because the MEST is just so different in its timbre. Just like it's just playing a different game than the Monarch, either the Monarch Mark II or the III. You can kind of tell how the Monarch Mark III builds on the foundation. Like when you have a third point of comparison, something from a different company, as different as the Monarch Mark II and III kind of sounded previously, as soon as you hear the MEST, you're like, oh, the Monarch Mark III is really kind of built on the Monarch Mark II's basic qualities. It's just basically increasing the treble, making it a little brighter, and maybe altering some other regions as well to respect that increase in brightness overall that they're going for. Whereas the MEST is just like, we just sound different, bro. Like, we just sound very different. The timbre, the actual relative tonal balance between regions is just doing its own thing. And I think for me, I kind of see the MEST as the better choice as a companion. Again, it's always personal opinion, right? But in my personal opinion, if I had to choose some combination of ownership between these three only, I would easily choose the MEST and the Monarch Mark II, because the Mark II is decidedly that much more different. It's less about the brightness, and it's doing its own thing elsewhere. It's like not stepping on the toes at all in the bright realm of the competition out there. Whereas the Monarch MKIII is like, I'm going to put a foot in the treble playing competition. I'm going to see who else sounds like they're pushing the treble around, and let's see who sounds better for a brighter listen, for a brighter playback experience. And I got to be honest, I prefer the MEST's playback as a bright player in my collection. But everybody's situation is different. Keep listening to see what you think is different and what appeals to you. Maybe it's a specific instrument I don't care about as much as you to hear in such a way. I don't know. But let's move on to the next track. Let's compare let's continue again for another short clip comparing the Monarch MKIII and the MEST MKII to see if there's anything we're missing from the previous comparison. We're going to listen to some female vocals and a little different implementation of the rock instruments. Okay, I could have kept listening to that, but the moment I hear a difference, sometimes I just gotta be like, bam, here's the difference. Let's talk about it. So the MEST is like, it has this powerful effect. I don't know if you're gonna hear this at home, but I heard it in real life, where like when you put it in your ears, everything just like kind of like pops. Things lift up that you thought you didn't hear in other sets. And I'm not saying you want to hear the background noise in a recording. I'm not saying you want that to come up to compete with your instruments being played back, but the MEST had that effect. It had that effect where suddenly the track wasn't as quiet sounding because there was this like white noise or like hum behind it. This is a common artifact of recordings, particularly when you're using a playback device that ups the treble, where like the MEST does. But you don't get that effect with something like the Monarch MKIII, despite where it's choosing to up things in the upper regions. Let's listen to another one, though. Let's actually loop the same section of the track back and forth between the Unique Melody MEST MKII, the Monarch MKIII, and the Monarch MKII. Let's go through all three of them now, looping the same bit, and see what differences we can hear. Are we impressed by the MEST's aha kind of sound, the openness that it brings? Was that clear enough, or do you need more? Because to me, it's like the Unique Melody MEST just has such a wonderfully polished, easy to listen to, but very bright and clear sound. Whereas then you move to the Monarch III straight from it, and it sounds like, yeah, it sounds like a well-rounded sound, but it's just knocking on that treble door a little, just ever so slightly too hard in one or two spots from where I would personally most prefer the timbre overall that it's going for. Like, I think with where and you hear this when you go to the Monarch MKII. When you go to the Monarch MKII, at least for me, I suddenly feel like I prefer where I'm at in the Monarch series with the MKII. It feels more comfortable for the kind of timbre and quality they're going for in that series. I think the MKII is more up my alley. I think the MKIII, again, it just treads somewhere in the treble that's like, while interesting, it's not achieving that same grandiosity that treble play can provide when you go to something like the MEST. I think that it's kind of a little bit, just ever so slightly out of its wheelhouse on this one. If you're not so convinced, if you're having a hard time remembering how they each sounded and you don't want to go back, here's a couple clips that are much shorter back and forth so you can make some more direct comparisons. Let's see what you think. Okay, did you hear the difference between the MEST and the Monarch MKIII in this case? Did it become more pronounced for you? Does it sound like you know where I'm coming from now, if you didn't believe me before? The Monarch MKIII, when compared directly to the MEST, shows you how like the MEST is an extremely polished product for what it's trying to do. And the Monarch MKIII, while exciting, while novel in the Monarch series, and still a strong recommendation on its own merits, it's hard for me to recommend it too strongly to people when it costs that much, when something else exists that I would personally prefer recommending to you like this, especially when the Monarch MKII is there. Which, speaking of, let's go back to the Monarch MKII. Let's bring it back into this short clip style repeat and see how we prefer it or not over the Monarch MKIII. Okay, we're going to move away from the Monarch MKII and III MEST trio situation in a second. I think the point is kind of proven at this point as far as I want to prove it. To me, the MEST MKII and the Monarch MKII are like done. You have those two in your collection and you're going to be like so super happy with what each of them does separate. And you will not feel the urge to get the Monarch MKIII or some other thing. It's like you could be set for life with those two, I swear. Like, those two are, on their own, phenomenal. I just don't like the Monarch MKIII, as much as what the Monarch MKII is doing. Again, it's just, I keep reiterating it. I just feel like my recommendation as a reviewer, my more responsible recommendation, and my more personal preference anyway, is to tell you, if you want to spend so much money, get the MEST and get the Monarch MKII and have that be your duo. I wouldn't really pressure anybody to pursue the Monarch MKIII at this time, given that suggestion. All right, now let's move on to the Moondrop Variations. Let's take away the MEST. We know we love it. Okay, we know what it's presenting. Let's go explore everything else. Like, what if you wanted to consider something else entirely? What if you wanted to save money and you didn't want to consider this expensive stuff? How does the Monarch MKII and III hold up against the other things? Let's start with the Moondrop Variations, because they're a wildly popular IEM, it seems, and they're a staple for a lot of people's collections. Let's compare. Okay, now we're cooking with oil. Now it's nice to do something besides the MEST for a second. I gotta be honest in this video. 20, 30 minutes in, now we're doing this, isn't it? Isn't that something? I gotta be honest. I preferred everything about the Monarchs in both cases, the Mark II and the Mark III, over the Variations. It's just, it's almost indescribable, but there's something about, like, as soon as we switched from the Moondrop Variations to the Monarch Mark II, there was this return of dynamism, of impact mixed with clarity, and it's such a beautiful sound. Like, it makes you so appreciate, like, it's hard to appreciate just how beautiful the Monarchs sound on their own without comparisons. Like, same can be said for any IEM, really, right? But once you do compare it to anything else besides the MEST, you start to really, really see, even in the Monarch Mark III, the one that I'm not recommending as much, it's still wildly enjoyable compared to even very well-known and liked products like the Moondrop Variations, which is not a cheap product either, I might say. I mean, come on, I can't get over how fun that was to go from the Variations to the Monarchs. Oh my gosh. It just popped again. The impact, that's how I would describe it. The Monarchs have this, like, impact and richness and roundedness that for a lot of people is, like, just perfection. Like, it's been reached, we're done for a lot of people. And the Variations, a lot of people love the Variations for their a little bit more neutral in quotes. I don't know what neutral means to anybody in this hobby anymore. What that even means for anything. It's seen as in the community as this, like, balanced set, as a more, like, analytical set or something like that. Well-rounded, but not necessarily trying to push anything insanely. And to me, it's like, yeah, it has a smooth quality to it compared to especially a lot of stuff at its price point and lower. But honestly, how can you go from the Variations to the Monarch and still prefer the Variations? I don't get that. I just don't get it. It's like night and day. As soon as you go to I can't. I'm like getting too amped over this for some reason all of a sudden. But the Monarch just sounds so beautiful. Like, enough. We're done. We're done talking about Variations suddenly. Let's listen to the Xenns top now and compare that directly to the Monarch MKIII. Let's just keep going. Let's compare other products now, one after the other. Okay, now this is where I find the sound comparisons to be a little bit more interesting, because the Xenns top sounds a little more akin to the Monarch's rounded sound. It's more realistic and like intimate sound. And it's kind of hard to say like this is clearly better within that wheelhouse of what they're both trying to do. It's like pros and cons a little bit so far, and it's kind of tough. I feel like the Xenns top is just ever so slightly less in the realm of trying to sound detailed, even though it really does present like all the details that that you want to hear significantly from your track playback. There's the effect of clarity that the Monarch offers that the Xenns top doesn't quite as much try to, at least in the Monarch MKIII's case. But let's go back to the Monarch MKII then. Let's reintroduce the Monarch MKII into this comparison and see how it plays against the Xenns top. Okay, depending on your playback device at home, you might be very tempted to say that the Xenns top is just like a poor man's Monarch. And you might... That's not actually the worst description. You know what? I'm going to call it that. It's the poor man's Monarch. Dan just said it. I don't know if anybody has made a similar comparison. It's just so funny. Like, if you have like 80 to 100 plus IEMs like a reviewer does, it just suddenly becomes like a thing to you, a reality that like there could be comparisons out there that people just haven't really made obvious. And if somebody out there has made a comparison on their own, not everybody's in a position to share that they found that. And I feel like I'm finding a striking similarity between the Xenns top and the Monarch MKII. But I do think that the Monarch MKII very clearly does have the upper hand in terms of its perceived resolution, its perceived clarity, and forwardness in an appealing way, in an aesthetically appealing way. I do give it to the Monarch in this case, particularly the Monarch MKII over the Xenns top. But interesting, you could get the Xenns top and be very close to striking distance of what you're getting from the Monarchs. Something to consider. Something to consider. But let's move on. I want to try to showcase also some other price points that people might be considering. So let's listen to the Tongzhou Wan'er, the Awful Performer 5, in succession, and so on and so forth. Up next is the Tongzhou Wan'er, or Wan'er? I don't know how people say it. All right. Okay, fine. It was $20, so we didn't really expect it to sound better. But, you know, people are always curious. What if this is all just a false, what if this whole game is messed up? What if it turns out that you can actually get fantastic sound from cheap stuff and people are just wasting their money on expensive IEMs? I'm sorry, but no. You do find a difference. The Wan'er is... I mean, I like the Wan'er. I think it's a great balanced entry at like $20, but no, you can't stop at the Wan'er. Unfortunately, that's all this is trying to prove. You have to go for something else if you want that extra something. Sorry, but let's check out next the Awful Performer 5. Maybe the Awful. I don't know how they pronounce it. The Awful Performer 5 will offer some semblance of reaching that wonderful sound up there without spending the major bucks to do it. Let's see. So we're just knocking them out one after the other here. The Awful Performer 5 lasted a little bit longer than the Tongzhou Wan'er. Maybe you could say owing to the higher price point. I'm not sure. But the Awful Performer 5 still just, it doesn't hold a candle to the Monarch. It really doesn't. I can't say that it's going to be close enough for you to feel like that's your preference. I don't think so. I really don't think so. As soon as the Monarch MKIII or the Mark II shows up, and feel free, like always, loop that back if you need to rehash what just happened for yourself. But anytime the Monarchs came up after the Awful, I just thought, wow, what a breath of fresh air. I just felt like the Monarchs brought that life back, that energy that I really, really appreciate. So there you have it. I would not recommend the Awful Performer 5 as a stopping point up to Monarchs. So let's go on next to the Hexa. Banging them out one after the other. So this one looks like it might deserve more attention, actually. This one's interesting, surprisingly. Because when okay, immediately the differences are clear. The Hexa does not have the same roundedness, if I will, or the same impact, depth, weight that the Monarch seems to have. It does seem to be a lighter on its feet set, the Hexa, but it's not like poorly produced. It sounds like pretty enjoyable, pretty clear and energetic. Okay. But it's hard to put an exact finger on just how valuable the weight of the Monarch is for our playback, but I really do think I value it more. Now, don't be fueled by like the analytical side of this video. Like you can hear the Hexa sounds plainly clear, and like you can hear the Hexa has a high degree of perceived detail. That's what the Hexa does pretty dang well. But it's not like a wonderful detailed journey that you go on with the MEST, and it's not the well-roundedness and relaxed feelness and authenticity-ness of the Monarch. So it's like something that's kind of like a cheap entry point for somebody who wants to get a really good ways into the hobby, maybe at the start of your whole thing into this hobby. But it is definitely, the Hexa is definitely not the end game of any one journey or another, I feel. But let's listen to it more, though, because that was still very interesting. It was more than the other comparisons I feel like we've made for the most part. So let's bring back the Hexa. Let's bring back the Monarch Mark II and III again and just see what else we can get on a different track from that.
I'm standing all by myself in the shadows, surrounded by the silence seeping in, alone with my thoughts, no one to follow, running on time that's paid thin. Can someone hear me screaming at the top of my lungs? Tell me that I'm only dreaming. Can someone take away this feeling? Feels like I am barely breathing. Come and save me. Tell me that I'm only dreaming. Everything around me spinning. Need someone to wake me up before it's too late. 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 Up before it's too
All right, I wouldn't go so far as to say the Hexa is competitive. I think that really kind of sealed it. I kind of already leaned that way, as you could tell before, but this one just kind of consolidated, cemented my thoughts on that. I think the Hexa is a beautiful sound for its price, especially, and might even be your preferred sound going up $100, $200, $300. It's a very easy access set for its price, and the sound is very nice. But it is not top of the line sound. It is not the end all. But that being said, again, it is still an interesting set to consider, at least as a kind of like benchmark point before you move on for the more serious purchases. Fair enough, if it's your thing. But you know what? I have my own thing at that price point. The Tin Hi-Fi T3 Plus. That one has long been my preferred recommendation for that price point under $100 for anyone to start the hobby. Like the T3 Plus is that is Dan's Audio Reviews first pick for starting the hobby. Like more than the $20 stuff that might be recommended, more than some $100, $150 stuff. I feel like the T3 Plus is like such a strong starting point for this hobby. So let's compare it. Let's bring the T3 Plus in against the Monarchs and bring back the Hexa for a short bit too, to have some reference point for that as well.
Trapped inside a world of pain that needs healing. I am only dreaming. Take me to a place where seeing is believing. Tell me that I'm only dreaming. Can someone take away this feeling? Feels like I am barely breathing. Come and save me. Tell me that I'm only dreaming. Everything around me spinning. Need someone to wake me up before it's too late.
So the T3 Plus is not great. Not when the word great is reserved for things like the Monarch, okay? If you compare directly an entry-level recommended product like T3 Plus or Hexa or something else to something like $1,000 Monarch, then prepare to be disappointed with your budget selection in your collection. Like, prepare to be like, I want that expensive thing. This is better, clearly. Because it is. It's more enjoyable. It's fuller. For whatever reason, it sounds more enjoyable. To me, anyway. To me. And I think to most people, honestly. But I can't speak for everybody. But the question becomes, do you prefer the T3 Plus or the Hexa in your journey towards the Monarch or towards the MEST? I think the Hexa has a better sense of clarity, a better sense of polish, like nothing is rough sounding in it. It's very clean. But the T3 Plus has a thump that the Hexa just doesn't have as much. And some people really like that thump to be present in their music, full stop. And if you want that thumpy quality, but you don't want to lose too much on the clarity, even if it's a little loss, then the T3 Plus is still my top recommendation for that total sound package. But I can see, honestly, I can hear rather, why somebody might prefer to start their journey in this hobby with the Hexa instead. You can't go wrong either way. It's whatever you want out of it. Do you want thump or not? All right, let's bring in the Sennheiser IE200 now.
What would you decide? Open one day.
oh my God. Like, that suddenly, like, you probably could have expected, like, Dan, why are you doing this? Like, why are you showing us anything under $1,000 when we're talking about the Monarch? Obviously, the T3 Plus, the Hexa, the Wan'er, even the Variations are all going to sound worse than something that's like $1,000 that's doing something special with its drivers or whatever, right? Right? Maybe not. When we hear the Sennheiser IE200, which is less than a couple $100, I think it's like close to $100 now, is it? If I'm not mistaken, it might be like $120. I could be wrong. Don't misquote me. But it's not more than $200 at most. And you're comparing it to the Monarch, and suddenly, on a rock track at least, one with a lot of noise, a lot of stuff competing for your attention, and the IE200 sounds like crystal clear. Like, it doesn't sound clear because of a trick of the treble being pushed, like across the board or something. It sounds clearer because it purposefully tones down instruments that would generate a sense of, oh, this track is too busy. Like, it's like whoever designed this Sennheiser IE200's sound, whoever tuned that, almost seems to have busy tracks in mind. Like, I enjoy the IE200 so much on busy tracks when other stuff that I usually enjoy is too bombastic, that, like, there's a reason why I put the IE200 on my wall of joy. Check the description for that, by the way. This is a Google sheet that I made ranking, not even ranking, just showing like my utterly top picks, period, for different kind of listening experiences. And the IE200, I had to double check it, but if it's not up there, it should be. The Sennheiser IE200 is like, no matter what expensive stuff you have in your collection, it seems to, at least in my collection, which is somewhat limited on the expensive end. Actually, I don't have all the expensive stuff out there. So, big grain of salt here. But amongst the expensive things that I have, the Sennheiser IE200 is one of the very rare sets that still has a place in a collection, that still has this wonderful quality to it. And it's that clarity. It's that like even-handed, balanced playback that doesn't make anything too loud for the sake of novelty, for the sake of enjoyment. It's just like, we're going to play a very easy to understand experience for you. You can listen to metal, you can listen to rock. It's going to be easy. Everything is going to be obviously detailed, but not like in your face about it. It's just there. It's just there. That's there. That's there. It's like very easy going about it. But it does great. Okay, next, let's listen to the, let's keep listening to the IE200, actually, and compare it now a little bit more extensively and bring back in the MEST to see how it still may hold up or not. Okay, so the it's again very interesting. The IE200 can sound like it has such a different tonal quality that it could just be your taste, even against something like the unique melody MEST. It really just kind of comes down to what your taste is there. But what I did find interesting is that, and particularly here, that the drum hits, the guitar presented it in this track. I much preferred the Monarch's presentation over the Sennheiser IE200. The IE200 just has this kind of, I wouldn't say anemic. I wouldn't say like it's completely dead neutral and uninteresting, but it isn't that same impact, that wow factor that you get when you have the Monarch turned back on. The previous track with the busy rock song demonstrated how the Sennheiser, the IE200, can have a benefit over expensive gear, but I think this track kind of goes back and says, well, if the track isn't terribly busy, like an intense rock song might be, or metal or something like that might be, if it's not too intense, like with too many things going on at the same time, then the Monarch really just wows you with every little string, with every little bam on the drums. It's just when you have a lot of it that the toned down quality of the IE200 is actually very beneficial. It actually lets you sit back and relax with your very busy music and just enjoy everything quite well. So I give it to the Monarch on this one. I think the MEST was just very different, but I brought it in for a little bit just to have that kind of additional point of reference. But now let's go back to something else. Let's move on, rather, and let's go to the TRUTHEAR X Crin Project Red, or I guess they just call it Red now. And let's see how that compares to the Monarch. So we're just hopping everywhere. We're trying every price point, all the most popular products right now, and we're getting to the bottom of this. Is the Monarch Mark II better or worse than what? We've already found that the IE200 was a pleasant surprise. Let's see if the Crinical Red sounds like a pleasant surprise as well. Okay, so the TRUTHEAR Crin Red is yet another example, unfortunately, where you really just won't get that high sound quality, that high enjoyment factor from a budget set. Nothing like what you'll get out of the Monarch. But I present it anyway because the Crin Red is very popular right now. A lot of people were interested in trying out in my demos, so I knew there was an audience who, if you don't already have the Red and you're trying to consider what to upgrade from it, it shows you what the differences are between a budget pick and a more expensive one. Okay, is the Red bad? No. Is it as good as the Monarch? No. It doesn't have that impact again. It doesn't have that well-roundedness, that realism and detail all in one package. It does some things well. It's well-balanced. It's not wonky sounding. It's pretty fine. It's a fine balance, but there's nothing that screams out to you like it's lovely and, oh my gosh, it's not worth it to spend more. It's okay for its price. Okay, now, before we go back to a total summary of everything we've listened to, let's for a moment focus on the budget stuff now that we've heard them a bunch and try to get like a firm handle on what the differences between the budget gear so far presented has for us as listeners. After that, we'll take it back and we'll summarize, and I'll give you my conclusions then. So, I think we really do hear how the T3 Plus has a thump, the TRUTHEAR Hexa has a clarity, and the Red is attempting to be something of a balance. I like the texture of the kind of bass strings and strumming on the Red. It's not bad there, but the whole package isn't quite there for me. I do prefer that upstanding quality of clarity that we get from the Hexa, and I do prefer that going the other direction from the Red and finding that the T3 Plus has a heft to it, an exciting thump, along with some crystal clear sound here and there that makes you go, okay, I'm getting some quality, like, detail retrieval from this set. It's not the best, but it's pretty good for something providing that thump. All right, but that being said, I think we can end this. I think I can just tell you my conclusions before you hear on your own a kind of overview, summary comparison in a second. My conclusion is the same as it kind of started at the beginning, because I've already thought about this a lot. The Monarch Mark II is the pick that I would offer you. If it too long didn't read, too long didn't listen, it's the Monarch Mark II all the way. The Monarch Mark III is an interesting take. It is a novel approach for them to try to explore at that company what it would sound like to be a little brighter, but I just don't think it nails it enough. It's a nice sound. It's a nice different sound for somebody who's going for something brighter and clearer sounding, but it's just not competitive enough for my take to consider over other very interesting bright sets that are out there. Please check out my description for my link to my Wall of Joy. It will give you all of my top recommendations for a personal collection to own, with no other fluff. I'm no longer ranking things in totality. I'm just giving you the best of the best, in my opinion, and that's it. Everything's always being compared from now on to the best. That's it. How does it compare for such a collection? Okay. Thank you for coming by today, guys. If you want to support me, please use the links in the description, and I'll see you around. Happy shopping.